One of the bloodiest, most disorganized wars in European history took place in 1854 to 1856 in the Crimea, a region by the Black Sea between Russia and Turkey. It broke out when Russians force attacked the Turkish fleet. The British and French governments were anxious to limit Russia's power in the area, so they joined forces with the Turks to fight against Russia. The war became notorious for the huge numbers of soldiers who died on both sides. As many as half the 1,200,000 who went to fight lost their lives, often due to the incompetence of their officers. The most disastrous battle took place at Balaclava when a British cavalry unit, the Light Horse Brigade, was mistakenly ordered to charge at the enemy through a narrow valley. The Russians above the valley simply bombarded the horsemen with cannon fire. Of 673 men in the charge, 118 were killed, 127 wounded, and over half of the men's horses died. Although many soldiers were killed in battle, thousands more died as a result of their appalling living conditions. The army camps and hospitals were crowded, and soldiers didn't have enough food, clothing, or medical supplies. Many fell prey to diseases such as cholera and malaria, which others died from infected wounds, exposure, and starvation. One thing was entirely new, though. This was the first war ever to have journalists and photographs on the spot, recording events as they unfolded. Back at the home, people could read shocking horrors of the war in their daily copies of the Times. The news caused a public outcry and led two remarkable women to take decisive action. A British nurse named Florence Nightingale took 38 nurses from England to Turkey to work in the army hospitals. Within weeks, they had cut the number of soldiers dying in hospitals from 42% to 2%, mainly by improving hygiene. Closer to the front, a Jamaican woman named Mary Seacole often treated men on the battlefield itself. To pay for medical supplies, she set up a guest house called the British Hotel, where she sold food and drink to soldiers and took care of the sick and wounded. The war finally ended in the spring of 1856 when the Russian Emperor Alexander II signed a peace treaty at the Congress of Paris, but British generals and politicians argued for years over who was to blame for the charge of the Light Brigade. One of the reasons why the British got drawn into the Crimean War was to protect their trade shipping routes and their growing empire in Africa and Asia. People called it the empire on which the sun never set, because it reached every corner of the globe, and India became one of the Queen Victoria's most prized possessions. Since the 1600s, a British trading company called the East India Company had gained control of a number of Indian ports and settlements, where they set up colonies. Gradually, the company took over more and more land and built up an army of British and local soldiers. By the start of Victoria's reign, large parts of India were technically in British hands, but not yet under British rule.